The smell of coffee filled the small underground shop in Neo-Seoul as He-jin wiped down his copper brewing equipment for the fifth time that morning. Outside, the city's neon lights flickered through the frosted glass windows, casting colorful shadows on the worn wooden floor. This was the last traditional coffee shop on Earth, hidden away from the instant coffee machines that now ruled the world above. He-jin looked at his watch, 6:30 a.m. Earth Standard Time. His movements were careful and measured as he prepared for another day of brewing. Unlike other shops that used automated systems, He-jin insisted on handling every step himself. His small shop, with its mix of old wooden chairs and smooth metal tables, stood out like an ancient tree in a forest of steel. The beans in front of him looked ordinary to most people, but He-jin knew better. These weren't just any coffee beans. They were grown in special quantum-shielded greenhouses on the outskirts of Neo-Seoul. The plants absorbed tiny amounts of quantum energy, making them shimmer slightly in the early morning light. "Time to begin," He-jin said to himself, reaching for his favorite copper pot. He had learned this special brewing method from his grandmother, who had sworn that coffee could do more than just wake people up. It could touch their soul. Back then, he had thought she was just being poetic. The first customer of the day walked in just as He-jin poured hot water over the grounds. The man wore a simple business suit and carried a tablet under his arm. "One regular coffee, please," he said, not looking up from his device. He-jin smiled and continued his work. The water he used was filtered through quantum crystals, another family secret. As he poured it in careful circles over the grounds, the coffee began to drip through. But something was different today. The drops seemed to hang in the air for just a fraction of a second too long, as if time itself was taking a small break. The businessman didn't notice, too busy with his tablet. But He-jin saw it clearly. In the coffee cup, the foam was moving in ways that didn't make sense. Instead of random patterns, it formed perfect geometric shapes that seemed to reach down into the cup forever, like looking into an endless tunnel. More customers came in as the morning went on. A tired doctor from the hospital next door, 2 students with their study tablets, an old woman who reminded He-jin of his grandmother. Each cup of coffee he served showed the same strange patterns, but none of his customers seemed to notice. Around noon, something even stranger happened. A customer walked in. At least, He-jin thought it was a customer. The figure was tall and seemed to blur at the edges, like a picture slightly out of focus. They sat at the counter and pointed to the coffee maker, not speaking. He-jin started his brewing process again, trying to act normal, even though his hands were shaking slightly. As he poured the water over the quantum-infused beans, the air around the coffee maker began to sparkle. The drops of coffee didn't fall down normally. Some went sideways, others moved up before falling down. When he finished the cup and placed it in front of the strange customer, the coffee foam showed the most complex pattern yet. It looked like a map of stars and galaxies, spinning slowly in the cup. The strange customer made a sound like tiny bells ringing and touched the cup gently. Then something impossible happened. The pattern in the coffee rose up out of the cup, floating in the air like a hologram. It spun faster and faster, throwing tiny spots of light across the shop's walls. Other customers gasped and pulled out their phones to record it, but their cameras wouldn't work properly. The strange customer stood up, leaving something on the counter that looked like a business card, but felt like it was made of light. Then they walked out, seeming to fade away before reaching the door. He-jin picked up the card. The words on it kept changing, but he could make out one phrase clearly. "Your coffee has been noticed by the council." He looked at his copper coffee pot, then at the quantum beans, and finally at the card again. His grandmother had always said their family's coffee was special. Now he was starting to think she had meant that quite literally. Outside, Neo-Seoul's artificial sun was rising higher in the sky. Inside the last traditional coffee shop on Earth, He-jin began to realize that making coffee might be more important than anyone had ever imagined. Jia stared at the coffee cup in front of her, watching as the foam pattern shifted in ways that shouldn't be possible. She had known He-Jin since they were kids, but this was different from his usual coffee-making magic. As the lead researcher at Neo-Soul's quantum physics lab, she knew when something broke the rules of normal physics. "How long has this been happening?" she asked, taking out her handheld scanner. The small device was meant to detect quantum fluctuations, but as soon as she turned it on, it started beeping wildly. He-Jin placed another cup on the counter, this one showing the same impossible patterns, since yesterday morning. "And look at this." He pulled out the strange card the mysterious customer had left behind. It still changed its appearance every few seconds, like a living thing. Jaya's scanner nearly exploded with readings when she pointed it at the card. "This is impossible," she said, checking the numbers again. "These readings suggest this thing exists in more dimensions than we can see." She looked up at her old friend. "He-Jin, what exactly did you do to your coffee?" "Nothing different," he said, starting to make another cup. "Same beans from the quantum greenhouse, same water through the crystal filter, same copper pot my grandmother gave me." As he worked, Jaya's scanner picked up more strange readings. She walked around the small shop, watching the numbers climb higher near certain spots. "Your whole shop is sitting on some kind of dimensional hotspot," she said. "It's like a place where our world is very thin and other dimensions can peek through." As if to prove her point, the coffee He-Jin was brewing started to steam in spiral patterns. The steam formed tiny dancing figures that floated up to the ceiling before vanishing. "The quantum-infused beans," Jaya said suddenly, nearly dropping her scanner. "They're not just absorbing quantum energy, they're creating some kind of resonance pattern. When you brew them, the pattern gets stronger." She typed quickly on her tablet, running calculations. "It's like hitting just the right musical note to break a glass, but instead, you're hitting the right quantum frequency to pierce through dimensional walls." He-Jin looked worried. "Should I stop making coffee?" Before Jaya could answer, the air in the middle of the shop began to shimmer. Both friends watched as reality seemed to bend, forming a shape that looked like wind chimes made of light. The chimes moved in a way that suggested they were alive. "Greetings, resonance makers," a voice said, sounding like bells in a gentle breeze. "We have been monitoring your frequency signatures with great interest." Jaya's scanner was recording everything, but her hands were shaking. "Who? What are you?" "We are members of the Harmonic Council," the chimes replied. "We oversee the balance between dimensions. Your world, what you call Earth, has long been classified as a death world due to its extreme conditions. But you humans have done something remarkable. You have found a way to create dimensional resonance through a simple beverage." He-Jin looked at his coffee equipment with new eyes. "My grandmother always said our family's coffee could touch people's souls." The chimes made a sound like quiet laughter. "Your grandmother understood more than she knew. Your species, shaped by surviving on a death world, has developed unique abilities. You find patterns in chaos, create harmony from discord, and now, unknowingly, you have begun to reach across dimensional barriers." Jaya's scientific mind was racing with questions, but before she could ask any of them, the chimes continued. "We would like to extend an invitation," they said. "Bring your coffee to the council. Let us study how Deathworlders have achieved what many thought impossible." The air shimmered again, and the chimes began to fade. "Consider our offer," their voice echoed as they disappeared. "The gateway will open again tomorrow." In the sudden quiet of the coffee shop, He-Jin and Jaya looked at each other. The coffee in their cups had gone cold, but the patterns in the foam now looked like maps to other worlds. "Well," Jaya said finally, "I guess your grandmother's special coffee recipe is about to become intergalactic news." He-Jin started cleaning his copper pot, his movements steady despite everything that had happened. "I should probably make more coffee," he said. "I have a feeling we're going to need it." The next morning, He-Jin's coffee shop was unusually quiet. He and Jada had closed it to regular customers, putting up a simple "closed for private event" sign on the door. They had spent all night preparing for the return of the Harmonic Council. "Are you sure about the readings?" He-Jin asked, carefully laying out his copper brewing equipment. His hands moved automatically through the familiar motions of preparing his workspace. Jaya nodded, not looking up from her tablet. "The quantum energy levels are 3 times higher than yesterday. Something is definitely going to happen." She had brought more scientific equipment from her lab, turning one corner of the coffee shop into a small research station. As He-Jin began brewing the first batch of quantum coffee, the air in the center of the shop started to vibrate. This time, instead of wind chimes, the dimensional visitors appeared as tall columns of swirling light. There were 3 of them, each one humming at a different pitch. "Welcome, Earth Dwellers," the tallest column said, its voice creating ripples in the coffee He-Jin was brewing. "We are pleased you have chosen to receive us." Jaya stepped forward, her scanner whirring. "We have so many questions. How do you traverse dimensions? Why is our coffee creating quantum resonance patterns? What makes Earth a death world?" The middle column shifted colors as it spoke. "Your world has gravity 30% stronger than most inhabited planets. Your weather is violently unpredictable. Your planet's core is unstable. Yet humans not only survive here, you thrive." The third column moved closer to He-Jin's brewing station. "And now you have done something extraordinary. You have created a substance that naturally harmonizes with higher dimensions." He-Jin finished brewing the coffee and carefully poured 3 cups. "Would you like to try it?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. He wasn't sure if beings made of light could even drink coffee. To his surprise, the light columns gathered around the cups. They didn't pick them up, but the coffee began to rise from the cups in thin streams, flowing into the light beings like rivers flowing upward. The shop filled with a sound like 1,000 tiny bells ringing at once. "Remarkable," the tallest column exclaimed. "The quantum harmonics in this beverage. They match the frequency of 5th-dimensional space perfectly. The Council must experience this," another column said. "It could change everything we thought we knew about Deathworlder potential." Jaya's scanner was recording everything, its memory almost full from all the unusual data. "What exactly would presenting to the Council involve?" she asked. "You would need to bring your brewing equipment and quantum beams to the Council's gathering place," the third column explained. "It exists in what you would call the 5th dimension." He-Jin looked worried. "Is it safe for humans to go there?" The columns chimed in what sounded like laughter. "You already send parts of yourselves there every day, through your art, your music, your cooking. These things exist partially in higher dimensions. That's what gives them the power to move your emotions. Your status as Deathworlders has given you unique advantages," the tallest column added. "Your brains have evolved to process multiple dimensional inputs without realizing it. You will be safe." The light beings began to fade slightly. "We must return now," they said. "The gateway will open again tomorrow at this same time. If you choose to accept, be ready with everything you need. The Council is eager to meet the Deathworlders who brew interdimensional coffee." After they disappeared, He-Jin and Jaya sat in silence for a moment. The coffee cups on the counter were empty, but they left behind patterns that seemed to move in impossible ways. "So," He-Jin said finally, "I need to pack up my grandmother's coffee equipment for a trip to another dimension." Jaya was already making lists on her tablet. "We'll need to document everything. This could revolutionize our understanding of quantum physics, dimensional theory, and coffee making." He-Jin started cleaning his copper pot, just like he did every day. But now each familiar motion felt different, knowing that his simple coffee shop routine had somehow caught the attention of beings from another dimension. "My grandmother always said making coffee was an art," he said softly. "I guess she never mentioned it was also interdimensional physics." "Hold the copper pot carefully," Yumho said, adjusting the sensors on He-Jin's brewing equipment. "It's not just a coffee pot anymore. It's our anchor to this dimension." The old scientist had arrived at the coffee shop early that morning after Jia called him for help. His gray hair was messy, and his lab coat had coffee stains, but his eyes were sharp as he worked. As the leading expert in quantum mechanics at Neo-Seoul University, Young-ho was exactly the person they needed. "Everything we know about dimensional travel is about to change," he said, checking his calculations one last time. "And all because of a coffee shop." He smiled at He-jin. "Your grandmother would be proud." He-jin finished packing his special quantum beans into a wooden box lined with crystal filters. "Will we really be safe in the fifth dimension?" he asked. Young-ho pointed to the small devices he had attached to their clothes. "These stabilizers should help. But honestly, I think we're already safer than most species would be." He tapped his head. "Human brains are special. Living on a death world forced us to process reality in unique ways." Jaya checked the time on her tablet. 5 minutes until they said they'd open the gateway. The air in the coffee shop began to shimmer right on schedule. This time, the dimensional opening looked like a door made of light and sound. The familiar wind chime beings appeared beside it. "Are you prepared, Earth dwellers?" they asked. Young-ho stepped forward. "We've taken every precaution we can think of. But I have a question. How do we know we won't lose our physical form in a higher dimension?" The chimes made their laughing sound. "Watch," they said. One of them moved through the doorway, and for a moment, they could see it exist in both dimensions at once. In the fifth dimension, it looked like a complex pattern of light and music. "Your forms will adapt," the beings explained. "Your consciousness will help you maintain stability. Are you ready?" He-jin gripped his copper pot tightly. Jia held onto her research equipment. Young-ho took a deep breath and nodded. Together, they stepped through the gateway. The sensation was strange, like being turned into music and then back into matter again. Colors they had never seen before flowed around them. Sounds had shapes. Light had weight. But somehow their minds adapted, just as the beings had said they would. When they could focus again, they found themselves in a vast space that seemed to go on forever in directions they couldn't quite understand. Their bodies felt normal to them, but they could see extra parts of themselves extending into spaces that shouldn't exist. "Fascinating," Young-ho said, looking at his hands. "We're perceiving multiple dimensional states at once, but our Deathworlder brains are handling it remarkably well." Jaya's scientific equipment was giving impossible readings. "Everything here. It's like pure mathematics made real. And look." She pointed to He-jin's copper pot. "The quantum patterns in your coffee equipment. They match the patterns all around us." He-jin looked around in wonder. "So this is what my grandmother's coffee was tapping into all along." The quantum beans in his wooden box were glowing now, resonating with the space around them. A group of beings approached them, some looking like geometric shapes, others like musical notes given form. They moved in ways that should have been impossible to look at, but somehow the humans' minds translated it all into something they could understand. "Welcome to the fifth dimension," the beings said in voices that felt like colors. "We must admit, we were unsure if physical beings from a death world could maintain coherence here. But you're doing remarkably well." Young-ho was already taking notes. "It's because we're used to chaos," he explained. "Earth trained us to find patterns in madness, to make sense of the impossible. This," he gestured at the dimensional complexity around them, "this is just another type of storm for us to weather." He-jin set up his brewing equipment, the copper pot gleaming with new light in the strange environment. "Should I make coffee?" he asked. The dimensional beings gathered closer, curious about what would happen when Deathworlder coffee met fifth-dimensional space. "Yes," they said. "Show us what your world has discovered." He-jin's hands moved steadily as he prepared his coffee brewing station in the fifth dimension. The copper pot seemed to glow from within, and the quantum beans floated slightly above the wooden box. All around them, beings of pure energy watched with interest. The harmonic council chamber was huge, stretching in directions that human eyes couldn't quite follow. Some council members looked like dancing lights, others like complex geometric shapes, and a few appeared as pure sound waves that somehow had form. "Begin your process, Deathworlder," said the head council member, a being that shifted between all these forms at once. Hejin nodded and started his familiar routine. But here, in the fifth dimension, everything was different. As he poured hot water over the quantum beans, the liquid moved in impossible patterns. Steam rose in perfect mathematical shapes, and the smell seemed to create visible waves in the air. "Remarkable," Young-ho whispered, watching his sensors. "The coffee isn't just making patterns anymore. It's actually harmonizing with the dimensional fabric around us." Jaya's equipment was recording everything. "The quantum resonance is stronger here," she said. "It's like the coffee was always meant to be brewed in this dimension." When Hejin poured the first cup, the liquid swirled with colors that didn't exist on Earth. The council members moved closer, their forms rippling with excitement. "We have never seen anything like this," the head council member said. The being reached out with what might have been a hand, touching the steam rising from the cup. Immediately, the chamber filled with musical notes that made the humans' hearts feel lighter. "Please, share this with all of us," another council member said. Like before in the coffee shop, the coffee rose from the cups in streams, flowing into the energy beings. But this time, something amazing happened. As each council member absorbed the coffee, they began to glow with new patterns. Colors shifted and changed, and the music of their voices became richer, more complex. Some of them even started to dance in ways that bent space itself. "This is more than just a beverage," one council member announced. "These humans have discovered how to capture the essence of dimensional harmony in liquid form." Young-ho stepped forward. "It's not just the coffee," he explained. "It's everything humans do. Our art, our music, our cooking. We've always been reaching across dimensions without knowing it. Living on a death world taught us to see beauty in chaos, to find patterns where others see only disorder." The council chamber hummed with. The excitement in the council chamber changed suddenly when a group of new beings arrived. These ones looked like sharp crystals made of dark energy, and they moved with stiff, angry motions. "This must stop immediately," the leader of the new group said. Its voice sounded like breaking glass. "Deathworlders cannot be allowed such free access to higher dimensions." Hejin's hands froze over his coffee pot. The council members who had been enjoying his coffee moved back, their lights dimming slightly. "Explain your concerns," Sector Guardian told. Hejin's copper pot continued to glow as he brewed more coffee, each cup creating new patterns in the dimensional barriers around them. The dark energy was slowly changing, becoming something neither the humans nor the council had seen before. "Look at these readings," Jaya said excitedly, showing her tablet to Young-ho. "The coffee isn't fighting the barrier, it's harmonizing with it." Young-ho studied the numbers, then looked up with wide eyes. "Hejin," he called out, "try brewing 3 cups at different temperatures." Hejin nodded, understanding. He set up 3 brewing stations, each using water at a different heat level. As the coffee began to drip, 3 distinct tones filled the chamber, like musical notes playing together. The crystal beings led by Tal shifted uncomfortably. "What are they doing?" Tal demanded. "Creating harmony," the head council member said softly. "Watch." The 3 different coffee brews created 3 different patterns in the dark energy barrier. Where they met, the patterns combined into complex shapes that looked like moving art. The chamber filled with sounds like a beautiful song. Jaya adjusted her sensors. "It's working. Each temperature creates a different quantum frequency. Together, they're making music," Young-ho finished. "Dimensional music." Some of the council members began to move in time with the coffee-created symphony. Even a few of the crystal beings started swaying slightly, their sharp edges softening. "This is why humans are different," Young-ho explained to everyone in the chamber. "We live on a world that's always changing. Sometimes it's peaceful, sometimes it's violent. We had to learn to see the patterns in everything, in storms, in earthquakes, in the chaos of nature. Hajin adjusted the temperature of one brew, creating a new note in the dimensional song. My grandmother used to say that making coffee was like conducting an orchestra, he said. Every cup had its own song. The barrier of dark energy was now full of swirling colors and patterns that moved like a dance. Where it had been meant to isolate and separate, it now connected different parts of the chamber in beautiful ways. Tal moved forward, their crystal form catching the light from Heijin's coffee. But how can you control it so well? Our calculations showed that Deathworlders would bring only disorder. We don't try to control chaos, Jaya said, smiling. We learn to work with it. Every artist knows that sometimes the most beautiful part of a painting is the unexpected splash of color. Every musician knows that sometimes the best note is the one you didn't plan to play. Yum-Ho nodded. Living on Earth taught humans that perfect order isn't always the answer. Sometimes you need a little chaos to create something new. The head council member floated to the center of the chamber, their light forms spreading out to touch both the coffee-created patterns and the transformed barrier. The Deathworlders speak truth, they announced. Look at what they have shown us. Not destruction, but creation. Not disorder, but a new kind of harmony. Hajin brewed one final cup of coffee, combining all three temperatures into a single brew. The cup glowed like a star, and when its steam rose into the air, it created patterns that everyone in the chamber could understand, no matter what dimension they came from. The crystal beings gathered close to Tal. Perhaps, Tal said slowly, we were too quick to judge. This is not the weapon we feared. This is art. Art and science together, Yum-Ho said. Just like on Earth, the mathematics of music, the physics of painting, the chemistry of cooking. We've always known they were connected. Now we can see how. The 3 cups of coffee continued to send their song through the dimensions, and slowly, the barrier that was meant to isolate Earth began to change into a bridge instead, a way to connect different dimensions through harmony rather than seal them apart. Jaya looked at her readings one last time and smiled. We didn't just bring coffee to the 5th dimension, she said. We brought something even more important. The human ability to find beauty in the balance between order and chaos. 3 months after their first journey to the 5th dimension, Heijin's coffee shop looked very different. The small underground space in Neo-Seoul had become Earth's first official multi-dimensional embassy, though from the outside, it still looked like a simple coffee shop. Hajin stood behind his counter, carefully brewing coffee in his grandmother's copper pot. The morning sunlight streaming through the windows created strange patterns as it passed through spots where the dimensions were thin. One quantum blend for our friend from the 7th dimension, he said, sliding a glowing cup across the counter to a being that looked like a spinning galaxy in a human shape. Next to them sat a regular human customer, drinking the same blend while working on her tablet, completely comfortable with her unusual neighbor. Jaya sat at her usual table in the corner, surrounded by research equipment. The small quantum physics lab she and Yum-Ho had set up in the back room was making amazing discoveries. Their first paper about cross-dimensional harmony through human culinary arts had caused quite a stir in the scientific community. The latest readings are fascinating, she said as Hojin brought her a fresh cup. Every time you brew coffee, the dimensional barriers get a little more flexible. But they're not weakening. They're becoming more like a musical instrument that anyone can play. Yum-Ho walked in through the front door, carrying a box of new quantum beans. Since their adventure, the greenhouse had expanded, now growing beans that could resonate with specific dimensions. The council sent another request, he said, smiling. They want us to teach more of their members about Earth cooking. They say understanding our recipes helps them understand dimensional physics better. Heijin nodded, watching as Tal, the once hostile crystal being, floated through a dimensional pocket to join them. Over the past months, Tal had become one of their most regular visitors, fascinated by how humans found patterns in chaos. Your world's chaos makes more sense to me now, Tal said, their crystal form softening into colors that matched the coffee's steam. Yesterday, I watched human children playing in rain. They weren't afraid of the disorder. They danced with it, made games of it, just like your coffee dances with dimensional energy. The copperpot hummed as He-Jin prepared another batch. The council had offered to give him more modern equipment, but he preferred his grandmother's old pot. It had opened the door between dimensions, after all. A group of new customers walked in, some human, some clearly not. He-Jin smiled as they all sat together, sharing a table and conversation, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. In just a few months, his small coffee shop had become a place where beings from all dimensions could meet, talk, and understand each other better. Who would have thought? Jaya said, watching the scene. That coffee would be the thing that finally brought the dimensions together. Young Ho chuckled. Humans have always used food and drink to make connections. We just never realized those connections could stretch across dimensions too. The afternoon light shifted, creating rainbow patterns as it passed through the dimensional pockets around the shop. He-Jin started brewing his special sunset blend, a combination of beans and temperatures that created colors even beings from the 9th dimension found beautiful. Your grandmother would be proud, Jaya told him softly. Her coffee shop is still bringing people together, just on a much bigger scale than she probably imagined. He-Jin touched the old copper pot gently. He could almost hear his grandmother's voice. Coffee is more than just a drink. It's a way to share stories, to make friends, to find harmony in a chaotic world. As the day went on, the small coffee shop continued to fill with visitors from across the dimensions. Each cup of coffee created new connections, new understandings, new harmonies. Earth's reputation as a death world was changing. Now it was known as the place where chaos and order danced together, where a simple cup of coffee could bridge the gap between dimensions. And at the center of it all stood He-Jin, still making coffee one cup at a time, helping the universe find harmony through the wisdom of a death world and the magic of a simple copper pot.